Hey, this is not a story about heroes. It's a story about time. About seconds. About 90 seconds that changed everything. About a country that decided to walk into hell and come back. But not everyone came back. This isn't Hollywood. This isn't Delta Force with Chuck Norris. This is Entebbe, the operation that showed the world that sometimes you don't ask for permission. You just act, and then the world stops. It's the story of Yoni Netanyahu, but it's also the story of his brother. It's the story of those who survived and those who are still alive, but only sleep normally during the day. At night, they sleep differently. Let's begin. Some say the hardest moment is the attack itself. Wrong. The hardest part is the seconds after, when everything can collapse. When euphoria starts to kill your vigilance. When success starts to have a price, and time starts hunting you like a sniper. Midnight, the terminal already cleared, but the danger still alive. The commandos are leading the hostages out. There is no time for tears, hugs, thank yous. Everyone has to run. Outside, there are still hundreds of Ugandan soldiers. Some don't know what's happening. Others know, and they're furious. All entrances to the terminal are secured, but no one knows when Idi Amin will give the order to attack. No one knows how many people will die if they stay just 3 minutes longer. Before the planes can take off, Israeli sappers plant explosives under hangars and under MiG-17s and MiG-21s belonging to the Ugandan Air Force. In total, they destroy 11 aircraft. This is not revenge. It's strategy. Prevent pursuit, prevent retaliation. Israel can't afford to have anyone chasing them after this operation. This is not about symbols. It's about making it home with the shield, not on it. On the C-130 ramps, doctors from medical units. The hostages are terrified, exhausted, some of them wounded. 2 are in critical condition. One of the soldiers, Yoni Netanyahu, is already dead. But morale? Impossible to describe. Everyone knows. A few minutes ago, they were 1 breath away from death. Now they are 1 second away from life. The C-130s rev their engines. The sky is dark. The ground is quiet, but only on the surface. Ugandan soldiers start moving toward the runway. Single shots begin to ring out, but it's already too late. 4 planes roar into the air. Behind them, they leave a terminal that was a cage, and an airport that became the stage of a legend. Israel didn't have enough fuel to fly all the way back without a stop. So, thanks to prior diplomatic contacts, pressure, and promises, they got a quiet green light from the Kenyan government to land in Nairobi. In Kenya, on the tarmac, they refuel, they hand over the wounded for treatment, they contact Tel Aviv. We've got them. We're alive. But what for Israel was a moment of relief, for Kenya would become a tragedy. But we'll get to that. Let's move to Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. July 4th morning, Ben Gurion Airport. Families of the hostages have been waiting for hours in total uncertainty. And suddenly, a plane appears, then another, then a third. Hostages walk down the ramps. They cry. They hold hands. Some fall to their knees and kiss the ground. For Israel, this is more than a military operation. It's a moment of national release. Proof that the world may be indifferent, the United Nations may stay silent. But Israel will not leave its people behind, ever. And even though the dead were few, emotionally, every single one of these people came back different. Some didn't speak for weeks. Others started writing diaries. Others still simply stopped being able to sleep. But they were there. They had survived. And that was more than a victory. It was a manifesto. We don't ask for permission. We act. Back to Entebbe. The terminal in ruins, soldiers dead, fighters burned, and Idi Amin, he's not talking to the cameras. He's not spreading his arms theatrically. He's silent. And his silence feels like the silence before an earthquake. Because now, when Israel has driven away with a triumph, he's the one left behind. Humiliated, alone, ready for revenge. Idi Amin wakes up to the reality he hates most, the reality of a loser. His airport has been wrecked. His army, humiliated. His image, shattered. What does a dictator do when he loses face? He doesn't admit fault. He looks for someone to punish. From where could Israel have reached Uganda? From where did they return? From Kenya. The Israelis got quiet permission from Kenyan authorities to land in Nairobi, to refuel, evacuate the wounded, and contact Tel Aviv. Kenya became the technical lifeline of the whole operation. Idi Amin knew that very well. A few days after the Entebbe raid, purges begin in Uganda. Amin orders, arrest all Kenyans working in Uganda. Many of them, engineers, drivers, civil servants, are detained, interrogated, tortured. According to data from that period, at least 245 Kenyans were murdered. Hundreds went missing. Thousands fled Uganda in panic. The Kenyan government, officially, does not speak out harshly. But behind the scenes, it cuts off all ties with Amin. That was the price of cooperating with Israel. The price of courage. The price of a one-time gesture. There is one more victim of this operation. Not a soldier, not a hostage from the terminal. Dora Bloch, a 75-year-old British woman, passenger on Flight 139. Right after the hijacking, she fell ill and was sent to a hospital in Kampala. She wasn't in the terminal when the hostages were rescued. After the operation, Idi Amin ordered her killed. She was taken from her bed and shot by members of his secret police. Officially, she disappeared. Unofficially, the CIA, MI6, and Mossad all knew. She'd been executed as an act of revenge and rage. Her body was found only in 1979. After Amin's regime collapsed, it was brought to Israel. Dora Bloch's funeral was held with full military honors. How did the world react to Israel's success? Israel, of course, celebrates. Standing ovations in the Knesset, newspapers full of words like courage, miracle, legend. The United States, surprised, but full of respect. Even President Gerald Ford talks about a heroic act of military and moral bravery. Great Britain stays quiet. Why? Because Dora Bloch was their citizen. Amin had just humiliated them. But they don't want a direct confrontation. The United Nations, as always, concerned. It didn't condemn Amin. It didn't praise Israel. It just expressed concern about the violence. One commentator put it like this: the UN expresses concern when the world is on fire, but it can't even blow softly on the flames. And Amin? He starts to unravel. His regime doesn't fall right after Entebbe, but something cracks. Amin disappears from view more and more often. He becomes more paranoid, more brutal, more detached from reality. He's convinced Israel is still planning to kill him, convinced Mossad is hiding in his closet, and he's not entirely wrong. Israel thought about it, but didn't do it. Every legend has its shadow zone. Operation Entebbe was spectacular, but it left consequences that never make it into the movies. The Kenyans who were killed, the elderly woman shot in a hospital bed, and the people who came home, but never slept peacefully again. Because how do you sleep when you know your life was saved by a second, and someone else's was left in Idi Amin's freezer? How did 90 seconds change Israel's history? War is not just tanks, strategy, and speeches. Sometimes war is 90 seconds. Sometimes war is the face of a man who has just seen death and doesn't know whether to run or to shoot. And sometimes, war is a decision taken faster than a blink. In Entebbe, everyone who came with a gun got their answer in lead. 3 minutes after midnight, the first shot, and the decision that opened the gates of hell. They enter through the main doors of the terminal, commandos from Sayeret Matkal. At the front, Yoni Netanyahu, the operations commander. Behind him, the elite of Israel's special forces. Trained, focused, precise. They shout, "Down, Israeli army! We're here to save you!" But not all hostages understand them. Some jump up, others stare, frozen. And the hijackers, surprised but still armed, open fire. 7 hijackers, armed with rifles, grenades, pistols. For days they controlled everything. In this moment, they have nothing, just reflex. The commandos shoot, accurately, fast. One terrorist tries to grab a female hostage as a human shield. He's shot in the head. Another pulls the pin on a grenade. He doesn't manage to throw it. A third tries to run, falls against the wall. The whole exchange of fire lasts less than a minute and a half. But in that time, a silent verdict is passed. The hijackers never stood a chance. During the action, 3 hostages are killed by stray bullets or in the crossfire. One of them, Jean-Jacques Mimouni, is shot by commandos by mistake when he jumps to his feet. It's a tragedy, but the scale of risk was enormous compared to the number of casualties. In the terminal, the dead are all the hijackers, around 45 Ugandan soldiers, 3 hostages, and, outside the building, Yoni Netanyahu. Yoni is not inside the terminal. He's covering the entrance and coordinating the assault. During the withdrawal, a Ugandan sniper in the tower opens fire. 1 bullet hits him in the chest. He dies on the spot. His men don't know it yet. Only the onboard surgeon who tries to save him knows. Yoni becomes the only Israeli soldier killed in the operation, but his death becomes a symbol. How did the Yoni myth arise? He was young, handsome, brilliant. He wrote essays on morality and war. He studied at Harvard. He commanded with cold precision. He died saving others. After his death, his writings were published as a book. His funeral was broadcast on Israeli television. His brother, Benjamin Netanyahu, set out on a political journey that would lead him to the prime minister's office. Yoni died on a runway, but his death built a road for an entire generation of leaders. Back to Entebbe, the gunfire stops. In less than 2 minutes, all terrorists are dead. The hostages lie on the floor, silent, stunned. Some think it's a dream, others cry. The commandos pull them up, carry them out. They turn terror into a sprint, from the terminal to the plane ramps, from hell to hope. 90 seconds. That's how long it takes to kill 7 people who held the whole world in their hands. That's how long it takes for history to shift course. That's how long it takes to create a myth. But that myth was built on blood, on death, on fear, and on a decision no one else dared to make. From afar, it looked like a miracle, like a perfect military operation, like a Hollywood film without CGI. Up close, it was a tragedy with people who breathed, cried, bled, and when the planes landed in Tel Aviv, not one person was the same as the one who had boarded Air France Flight 139 a week earlier. July 4th morning, the airport in Tel Aviv. The Hercules ramps open, people step out, but they're not poster heroes. They are figures carved out of dread. The hostages are silent. Some can barely stand. Others cling to each other mechanically, as if they can't believe the body next to them is really there. Families are waiting. Volunteers hand out water, blankets. Doctors look into their eyes. But no one actually says out loud, "It's over." Because it wasn't over. It was the beginning of a different version of their lives. How did Entebbe change the war on terror? Some military operations end in reports. Entebbe never did. It slipped into textbooks, into presidential offices, into generals' heads, into the DNA of every counter-terror unit from Tel Aviv to Washington, because after that night the world understood, you don't talk to terror. You go through the door, and you come out with the hostages. Before Entebbe, terrorism was a media phenomenon, not a strategic one. Western states negotiated, paid, gave in. Hijackers were often treated as revolution celebrities. After Entebbe, the rules of the game changed. The terrorist stopped being a political voice and became an enemy to be eliminated. Governments started building special units ready for extreme operations. Israel stopped being the exception. It became the model. Within 2 years of the operation, Britain expands SAS with a counterterrorism wing, France creates GIGN, Germany reorganizes GSG-9, the United States begins building Delta Force. Every one of these units studied Entebbe like scripture, slowly, in silence, with maps spread over tables and questions like, what if our people have to do the same? Because they knew one thing, the world wouldn't get any safer. But it wasn't just the armies listening. The terrorists were learning too. After Entebbe, planes started being swapped for buses, schools, cafes, harder to storm. A new kind of attack appeared, Not a hijack, but choreographed execution on camera. Groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda emerged, understanding that power lies not in blackmail, but in chaos. Terrorism mutated from organized war of ideas into an illogical, media-driven theater of violence. Entebbe was the last moment when the world still believed that a special operation could be truly surgical. Then came Lockerbie, Munich, 9/11. Entebbe cemented the Israeli doctrine. We don't talk to terrorists, we neutralize them. If we don't, we stop being ourselves. This philosophy runs deeper than strategy. It's the legacy of the Holocaust, never again selection. It's a geopolitical reflex, Israel's isolation among enemies. Its identity, the citizen must know the state will not abandon him. For other countries, this was a moral revolution. For Israel, an obvious truth. No state officially endorsed Israel's operation, but everyone, quietly, studied it. At the United Nations, a storm of emotions. Arab states speak of violating Ugandan sovereignty. Israel answers, if sovereignty serves crime, it stops being a value. Entebbe didn't just become an inspiration, it became a symbol that sometimes you have to act against the world to make the world wake up. After Entebbe, nothing was the same. Decades of counter-terror strategy began. Wars that no longer looked like wars, but like surgeries performed under live broadcast. And in every one of those decisions, in every briefing, in every mission, there was a piece of that July night in 1976. What really survived in Entebbe? The state, the man, or the legend? Every great story wants an ending. This one never got one. Because Entebbe didn't end when the planes landed. Entebbe lived on in memory, in politics, in dreams. Today, the question is not, what happened? But, what stayed with us? Israel proved one thing. It doesn't need anyone's permission to rescue its people. It doesn't need debates, resolutions, warm words from the UN. It needs a map, courage, and people willing to fly where no one else wants to be. From then on, the world looked at Israel not as a victim, but as a player. Fast, ruthless, ready to die on its own terms. That was a geopolitical turning point, and a mental one. Israel was no longer just defending itself. Israel started acting ahead of time. Entebbe is a story about the boundaries of humanity, about how a soul looks after 7 days under a rifle barrel, and how the face of a soldier looks when he comes home but knows his commander will never open his eyes again. Yoni Netanyahu died, but was reborn as a symbol. He wasn't just a hero, he became a national narrative. His essays were published. Schools, bridges, barracks were named after him. And his brother, Benjamin Netanyahu, went from grief into politics. His entire security doctrine, his hard rhetoric, his never-again weakness, are all children of Entebbe. Without that death, there would be no such career. Yoni didn't just save hostages. He laid the foundation for Israel's security policy. This was not just a military operation. It was a test. Is it worth risking your own people to save others? Does morality end where strategy begins? Can one state break borders if the stakes are its citizens' lives? Israel answered, yes, always. The world answered, it depends. Entebbe is not a film, but the world needed it to look like one, because only in a film can you rescue people so perfectly and come home. Only in a film can you afford myths that bandage wounds. But for those who were there, Entebbe is not a legend. It's a night that never ended. How did Benjamin Netanyahu build his path on Yoni's legend? He wasn't on that plane. He wasn't holding a rifle. He didn't run down the C-130 ramp in Entebbe. But that's exactly why he had the most to prove. Because sometimes a legend needs a witness. And sometimes the witness becomes a politician. And a politician. An icon. That's how Benjamin Netanyahu's story begins. Benjamin Netanyahu, Yoni's younger brother. Born in Tel Aviv, raised partly in the United States. Son of Benzion Netanyahu. Historian, intellectual, nationalist to the core. A family of ideas, languages, passion, and obsession with Jewish survival. As a young man, Ben joins Sayeret Matkal, the same unit as Yoni. But Yoni is the star, the commander, the authority. Ben, more the capable operator. The observer. In 1976, during Entebbe, Ben is nowhere near Uganda. But everything changes when his brother doesn't return from the terminal. Yoni's funeral is a national event. Ben stands by the coffin. He doesn't say much, but he feels everything. Within a few months, Ben leaves his studies. He swaps Harvard classrooms for the Israeli stage. He becomes the face of the Yoni Netanyahu Project, an institute dedicated to the fight against terrorism. He starts writing, speaking, analyzing, debating in the United States. He meets politicians, generals, journalists. He's not yet a politician. He's the voice of a tragedy whose main credential is that he carries the same last name as a dead hero. By 1980, Ben Netanyahu starts appearing on CNN, NBC, ABC. In America, he becomes an expert on security, counterterror, and the Middle East. He speaks English fluently, has charm, confidence, and the shadow of his brother behind him. Israeli politics notices. In 1984, he becomes Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. In 1988, he enters the Knesset. In 1996, he becomes the youngest prime minister in Israel's history. In his campaign, in every speech you hear the word Entebbe. In every ad, a photo of Yoni. This isn't manipulation, it's myth in action. Netanyahu was never a general, but he thought like a commander. From Entebbe, he drew 3 lessons that became his political compass. Don't wait for the world. The world won't move. Negotiations are good, as long as you have leverage. Israel's security is not a topic for debate. It's the condition for existence. That's why his policy was hard. That's why he didn't fear clashes with Iran, with the UN, with Obama, with the European Union. That's why his opponents called him a cold cynic, and his supporters, Israel's last realist. For some, he exploited his brother's death. For others, he built a lasting monument to that sacrifice. In every interview, he circled back to Yoni. In every book, a paragraph on the terminal. In every military decision, a reference to the spirit of Entebbe. In Israel, it worked. Society needed strong symbolic leadership. Those close to him say Benjamin Netanyahu never truly made peace with his brother's death. He doesn't talk about it emotionally. But every one of his political decisions carries a trace of revenge, a trace of responsibility, a trace of, we will lose no one ever again. He trusts no one. He lets nothing go. His mantra, when evil comes through the door, don't ask if it's worth reacting, just kick it in faster. That's Entebbe. That's Yoni. That's him. Entebbe created many heroes, but only one of them lived and became prime minister. Benjamin Netanyahu was not in Uganda that night, but he carried Uganda inside him his whole life. He wasn't the one who pulled the hostages out of the terminal, but he was the one who pulled from that operation a mandate to rule Israel longer than anyone in its history. Benjamin Netanyahu didn't die in Entebbe, but Entebbe died inside him. He wasn't there that night in Uganda, but his whole life was a return from that night, a return without his brother, without closure, without an ending. And maybe that's exactly why he became prime minister. Not to win elections, but to make sure the world would never again underestimate what it means to lose a person and regain a state. Because Entebbe wasn't just a military mission, it was an answer to fear, to passivity, to history. Israel said to the world then, if you don't pull our people out, we'll pull them out ourselves. And the world had no answer, but Israel already did. Because Entebbe changed everything. That's when they started building what we now call Israel's national security system. Integrated intelligence structures, independent channels for action outside diplomacy, the legal and political right to operate beyond borders, a doctrine of, we don't wait for permission, and a moral rule, never again helplessness. From Entebbe was born a philosophy that today forms the core of the IDF, Mossad, the special units, and the government. It wasn't just a rescue mission. It was the moment when the state learned one thing: security cannot be a reaction. It has to be a structure, a system, a daily decision. And from that day on, Israel didn't just defend itself. It started preparing, always in advance. If you've stayed with this story to the end, it means something in you trembled. Because this isn't just a story about politics, the military, or two brothers. It's a story about where words end and decision begins. And that's why I'm asking you. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like, share this video, not for the algorithm, for memory. Because if not us, then who will tell these stories the way they deserve to be told? And make sure you're with us in the next episodes, because very soon we'll show you how the shadow of Entebbe still steers Israeli politics, special operations, and even decisions about war and peace. Because some operations end with the last grenade, and some last forever.